And everybody here had some kind of a personal relationship with Dad, one way or another, and we can all agree that he was a one of a kind. A guy that come from a map dot of a town, a whistle stop pretty much on the seaboard coastline, to helping educate hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over the course of his 79 years. And I didn't learn anywhere near as much from Dad as I wanted to, but I learned enough to know that it's special to have friendships with people, and he obviously had some sort of a relationship with everybody here, and you all meant something to him. The ones that came to see him in the hospice, it made his day, or the ones who called him. It meant a lot to him that you took the time to come see him. And the people that left notes and on Facebook pages, it made his last couple of months, he really came to realize what he meant to everybody. And I can't emphasize that enough, because he sure told me, and I'm sure he told Christy the same thing. But, Daddy wasn't the easiest person to deal with. I'm sure there's some that don't have very nice things to say about that. But they probably deserved it in the first place. So, he read more books than Amazon. He was a wealth of information, and he was, as Christy said, a font of useless information, and usually it was at the most inappropriate times when he spoke it. But I just, his humor, his dark humor, his stories were, the stuff that he did was, I don't think any of us could live the lifetime that Daddy did. I can recall some of the best stories, beginning with, me, the mouse, Eddie, and Marsh, and they always wound up with something interesting happening. I can recall one particular story about a Saturday evening after the beer store closed, and the fire whistle goes off in town. And Daddy was among other things, he was a volunteer firefighter when he was around. And they were out of beer, so they figured they'd go check out what was going to happen. And so they show up, and lo and behold, the Amtrak was coming into town with a hot box on the axle on fire. And so they pulled the fire truck across the road there and waiting on the Amtrak to come, and Daddy pulls Marsh off to the side and says, and hands him some money, says, "Now you gonna go find the club car, and you're going to get us a six-pack of beer." And Marsh says, "Well, what if they won't sell it to me?" Daddy looked at him and said, "Well, tell them we're going to let their goddamn train burn down." So anyway, Marsh goes in, and this is when was it, Marsh? The early 70s, late 60s. He said, so I've gotten both sides of this story, but he said he went in there and there was a bunch of beatniks in there, and they all kind of looked at him because he had a Parkton Fire Department jacket on, and he's looking for beer. And I think it was Old Milwaukee. And so he got a six-pack of beer, and he went back and found Daddy, and Daddy was running the axe, and he bumped him, and Daddy handed the axe off to the next one, and they went on, and they had a pretty decent Saturday night after that. But, Daddy, I don't know, some of you guys might not know that he was a pilot. And he was somewhat of a daredevil of a pilot. There was not a power line that he would not try and fly under. There wasn't a cinder block to be skipped across Lake Upchurch early on Sunday mornings. That came to an abrupt halt one morning where somebody got up a little earlier than Daddy and was heading across the lake on this old John boat. Daddy said he had come down and he lined up and he winged that cinder block out, and he said, about the time I did that, out comes this boat. He said, and the skip rate and the puff rate on the boat were matching. And he said, and I fed the power to that thing and I jacked it out to try and get away. He said, and I'm looking over and looking. He said, and that fellow's motor must have miraculously died about that point. And he turned around and did this, and the cinder block goes sailing over his head and hits in the water. And he said that fellow wheeled around and looked and grabbed his fishing rod and started fishing. And Daddy said, I never threw another cinder block out of a damn plane. But he lived I'd like to say at sometimes the life on the edge. He was a skydiver. He was a master rigger. He was a master craftsman all the way around. He was a jack of all trades, and he was master of most of them. And if he didn't master it, it was really because it didn't interest him. And he liked to be around interesting people as well. And generally, Dad was the most interesting, he was the most interesting man in the world. Because he had so much knowledge to share, and it applied. And so I'd like to thank everybody again for coming out here, and we're all gonna. Everybody's got a Jack moment. I'm sure there's more Jack stories to go around than there are hours in the day, and there's some of his co-workers that were here that there's stories that we didn't hear, and family that's been here that some of us missed. So after Christy talks, if anybody else has anything they want to come and say, we'd love for you to come up. We all love a good Jack story, and that's pretty much about the reason we're here, is to hear some Jack stories. So thank you, and Dad, we love you, and we're going to miss the hell out of you, because it's the end of an era, folks. It really is. So thank you.
Hi.
Howdy.
I wrote my shit down. And then I can't read it with my glasses on. Man, getting old's good. So, where to put it? Hang on, bear with me. This is so typically me. I have, damn it. Also,
Do you need help?
so, I always need help. I have a card that's it. Dang it, there's a little card in here, Jeremy. There it is. All right, jackass. Thanks. Okay, here we go. Let's start this off with a limerick that Dad wrote. If you spent enough time around Dad, you heard a limerick because he memorized all of them. All right. A limerick that's clean as a waste and viewed by most folks with distaste. But throw in some lust and a pendulous bust, and it's better if somewhat less chaste. IJL 9998. He loved limericks, the dirtier the better. And he actually quoted one to me the week before he died, so they were all still in there. He wrote a lot. He wrote a lot of thoughts. He wrote a lot of poetry, mostly when he was younger. It was one of the many artistic expressions of his, and I wanted to read a couple of them. Wait, it was 2 pages. I had it marked with the card that I just took out. I'm usually slightly more organized than this, but I've had a margarita. Okay, so this is actually one of my mom's favorite poems that he wrote. It's called Little Soldier. Dear little soldier, 4 feet tall, you've climbed the ivy on the wall. You fought your battles, had your fun, and all day long your races run. You look so peaceful in your bed, I touch your brow and kiss your head. I love you so and so I should, you hero of the backlot wood. And he wrote this in 1966, and his footnote says, for my son, as yet unborn, still it applies 20 years later. And then I thought this one was really interesting considering, current events. It's called On Predestination. When you go, I guess you've got to go, and what you are, I guess you have to be, but I wish my going, being, doings were left by fate entirely up to me. And I really feel like he did. He took his fate in his hands. But he was a grandiose artist of all means. He painted and carved and blew things up. And growing up with such a father and being exposed to the unconventional, none of my friends knew how to reload bullets, but I did. He would utilize the local child labor in his ammunition reloading. Skip knows. Back then it took about 4 different presses to reload a bullet, and now it's a single fancy little machine. He'd even cast his own projectiles out of lead, and I distinctly remember the sound those hot little bullets made when he would knock them out of the mold into a bucket of water. That pew sign as the water immediately around the bullets flash boiled then cooled. Ah, damn it!
That's Jack.
What's Jack doing?
Truly.
It's Papa Jack.
It is. I got to grow up at the School of Design, and I don't care if it's the College of Design now. It will always be the School of Design. But I got to grow up there, and we spent Friday nights at work with Dad, building and creating, sometimes being bored. But I remember being excited when there was nobody to work in the tool room, because that meant that I got to do it. And I got to check the tools out to students and check them back in. It made me feel like so cool and grown up. Dad taught me how to use all those machines and tools safely. And I, like every student who passed through those doors, had zero desire to incur his wrath. Saturday nights were sometimes spent with friends coming over to share laughter and music and good times. We listened to back porch music and a Prairie Home Companion, and I thought for way too long that powder milk biscuits and Bertha's Kitty Boutique were real things. Those nights were so much fun, and Dad had this particular facial expression when he would pull out his guitar and tune it. It was this one. You could talk to him, and not a damn thing you said registered, because he was too focused on the sound those strings were making. He was never one to mince words. The space between his mind and his mouth were greased with the same stuff that Clark Griswold put on his saucer sled. They did not even slow down between thought and verbalization. When I was about 14 weeks pregnant with Dagan, we went to see Dad and Linda for dinner. Dad opened the door, looked at me, and said, "You're really packing on the weight, aren't you?" I said, "Actually, I'm not, but thanks." It's redistributing. Linda was appalled, and I could still see the look on her face behind him that I cannot believe you just said that. I laughed it off because that's Dad. I got Dad. I'm so painfully much like Dad. I was very fortunate in the last months of his life that my job allowed me to work remotely. I set up an office in his hospice room and commuted there every day, with a few exceptions. Anything that might make the man happy, I was willing to do. Once he got out of bed and put on pants that first time to go out and smoke, that was it. Jack was back in all of his jackness. I would walk in the morning and he would say, "Thank God you're here. Let's go out and smoke." I'm like, "Wow, Dad, how about hey, Christy, nice to see you. How are you doing?" But we would go out several times a day, enjoy the sunshine, and talk. He would find things that he wanted Ibby or I to get done. He would push all of my buttons just to get a rise out of me, and then giggle like Muttley on Hanna-Barbera. He enjoyed it, so I gave him that. He asked me the week before he passed what I wanted for my birthday, and I said, "I don't know, Dad. I can't really think of anything." He said to buy myself something on him, to which I responded that being able to spend this time with him was a gift. And I meant it. It was a gift that I will forever be grateful for. When he kicked the bucket, shuffled off his mortal coil, run the curtain, and joined the bleeding choir invisible, he knew he was loved and that he made an impact on innumerable lives. I think he went out on his terms. He had X, Y, and Z he wanted to make sure got done, and when he was satisfied that they were complete, he felt okay to let go. He didn't suffer, and his last breath was spent with Ibby and I holding his hands. I've met a lot of people over the years who went to school there, and the response is always, "That's your dad?" Yep, that's my dad. Anybody else?
How do we follow that?
I know.
I am good.
You have this little spot up here that you get to stand. I'm used to walking around. I met Jack when I was 5. For those of you guys who don't know me, my name's Jeremy. I'm his stepson. I've been around for a really long time. The great thing about Jack was the fact that he was always consistent. Like, for me, he tells stories, and Ibby and Christy knew him before I did, right, of the wild and crazy Jack. There was that part of his life. And then the part of his life that I got to know him was this very, very, very consistent person. And that offered me a lot, right? So I call this place home. This is home for me. I lived here for a number of years. And, he offered me the safety to be able to, just come here and live in a neighborhood with a group of people, sort of this wing of the house and a couple people over here, that I consider family and home for me. And I'll always be grateful for him for that. And though Jack never did anything that he didn't want to do, right? Like that sums Jack up in a sentence. But it's not completely true. And for I'm sure everybody here, but I knew he loved me because of the number 45. If you knew Jack, he hated sports. He hated the idea of seeing sports, talking about sports, anything like that. He's attended 45 football games in his life, and all of them I was in. And he showed up on a Friday night, and he spent his whole Friday night watching a football game that he had no clue what was going on. I'd ask him afterwards and be like, "Oh, what'd you think of this play?" And he'd be like, "Football." But he loved me. He showed up. He told me he was proud of me.
You did better than me and Chris.
I got old mellow Jack.
Yeah, exactly.
And I loved him. That consistency I try to bring with me everywhere I go. In the relationships I have, just always bringing the same person to the room so that people know who they're talking to and what they're about. And that's something that I got single-handedly from him. And I love him for it. I am absolutely going to miss him, but I'm glad for the family that I have because of Jack. So thank y'all for coming.
We're glad to have you.
Anybody else?
I'll talk to him. Okay. We're talking Jack stories, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, Jackie was my cousin. He was that big, and I was about that big. And my name's Buddy Haggie. And so Jack to me was this mystical creature because we lived in Roanoke, Spartanburg, and we'd drive every holiday to Parkton to see our grandmother, and Jackie was there, and I'd say, "I want to go see Jackie." I go see Jackie, and we drive up, and one time we drive up, he's got parachutes out. And I'm a little kid about this big, and I'm going, "Ah, parachutes, cool." My mother's going, "Frank, don't let him get near that." Got me right off the bat. And so that's like, it was so mystical. Next time I come back, and we're a year later, and he's sitting in his side yard, and he's shooting, he'd made a mortar. And he's shooting D-size cell batteries over the road. Y'all weren't there. Over the road in trying to hit a target.
But we know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so that again, I'm going, oh my gosh, this guy, they can't do him. And so we leave. Next year we come back. The emphasis airplane is there. And Jackie says, come on, buddy, let's go for a ride. He took me for a ride in that airplane, and it took about 3 or 4 days before I realized he was just scaring the piss out of me. If he'd turn that plane and he'd dead down towards that power line, he'd say, we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. Wham! And I'm still a kid like this, and I'm like, ah! You know? I don't know if I should tell this, but
Yes, Lord.
Yes.
the little Coke cans full of sand were sort of bombs we dropped on these old shacks out in the middle of nowhere, and they'd explode in the plane, dropping them. And so it's a lot of fun. You know, and so every time, the next time I come back a year later, he's got a motorcycle. So he comes down and says, jump on the motorcycle, we're going. And he takes me to see all these, the beach or wherever it was, the lake that everybody goes to. I don't know where it was. But it was a lot of fun. He had all these girls around there, and I thought I was really cool and everything, sitting on the back of it. But he came to visit us when we were in Colorado, and we talked to him. He's a person that I really wish I'd have spent a lot more time with, because he was truly an interesting person. He knew what he was talking about, and he was always in depth with what he said. And I'll always love him for my life. He was a great person. Thanks for the rain, Jackie.
Got anybody else?
I just have a few things to say. I worked with Jack.
That's all right.
I worked with Jack for almost 10 years at the College of Design, School of Design. Never have I met a more interesting man than Jack Lancaster.
Yeah. I can't.
Jack had a lot of sayings. Some of my other co-workers are not here, who we used to all work together. And I'm just going to say a few of his sayings. First one I want to make is, I don't make house calls. Well, I'm here now. We tried to get Jack to go to a birthday party, and that was what he said.
Sounds right. Yeah.
The other one the students loved the best was, let me show you how that's done.
Also,
Usually that was the point where he'd sit his beer down.
The students were very good at abusing tools, which Jack did not have a great deal of patience for, but apparently inside, Jack had a great deal of patience because he worked there a long time. And he saved a lot of people's appendages. But he did say one thing. I guess I got to hold my language.
no, you don't.
They could mess up an anvil. You can imagine what his French was. And the anvil in the back in the welding room had a huge chunk taken out of it. And that was the proof. And one last thing, when it was time to close the shop, seal up the books, Moses.
Anybody else? I got one more Jack story, and it relates to funerals and rain. And when my grandpa died, we buried him, and it was raining just like it is right now. And the old gentleman that my grandpa left to go to World War II with, they walked up beside the casket. They were the honorary pallbearers, and Daddy and I were standing at the very edge of the tent. And I'd kind of weaseled myself up like this, and by then I was a lot taller than Daddy. And I'm standing there and I'm looking, and I can see water falling like this. I see Daddy. And you knew when he was getting ready to break out into a snicker because his nose kind of changed its shape. And he's sitting there doing like this. And the old men are doing their... Finally they right face and they start walking off, and it makes a little bit of space. And we step up there, and I said, "What in the hell's the matter with you?" He says, "Goddamn water's been dripping down my neck ever since they put Daddy on this thing." He said, "Thank God, I thought I was going to take a bath." He said, "And I damn near lost it." I was like, "All right, well, so thanks, Dad. Appreciate it. Could at least... This is Jack's dark humor." But... Do what? There was thunder earlier. There was lightning somewhere. But, anybody else got anything to say? Lisa Yao, I know you can come up here and talk about Daddy. Well, I guess we'll not really wrap everything up because everybody can hang out, but I reckon we'll let Mr. Ron, who is the neighbor down the street, say a few words, and then we'll wrap this all up.
Hey, I'm Ron. I live down the road, obviously, and I've known Jack for about 22 years. And the first time I ever met Jack is when he came up to me and he goes, "Was that you blowing up fireworks down the road?" I was like, yeah, that was us. And that's when we had a good friendship after that, because that's when I realized Jack liked to blow up stuff too, just like me. So Jack taught me a lot of things about explosives and fireworks, and we had some pretty good fireworks shows here in Kings of the Meadows. First it was just a couple of us hanging out, and in one year there was probably like 30 people hanging out, and I didn't even know none of them. They just came by because they knew we had fireworks going on. And Jack taught me a lot of things. I mean, he was interesting to be around, and I just loved being around him. And he just had so many stories to say, and I loved hanging out with him. A long time ago when he used to drink, it was even funner. But even after that, it was still fun. But I remember one time when we did our little fireworks show one year, he pulls out, "Oh, I got some things I made up just for that." And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. And he comes out and brings all these mortar launchers out. And that year we shot like 100 mortars at one time. And I was like, wow, the cops are going to come and we're going to be in trouble. No one came, luckily, because half the neighborhood was sitting here watching us all doing it, So it was a great neighborhood to be in. And, Jack was a main key of this whole neighborhood, and we loved him. I loved him to death, and I think about him all the time, and I wish things were different, but at least I had an experience with him, and it made my life that much better.
Here, here. Here. We caught a lot of you too, man.
Get back over. Anybody else? Hey, is somebody gonna go once? Anybody? All right. Well, once again, thank you guys. Thank you for sharing your stories. And thank you for remembering him. And just we never really die. And Daddy looked at me when all the realization of this kind of hit him hard, and he looked at me and he said, "So what are they saying? I'm dying?" I said, "Well, Daddy, we're all dying. Every one of us. We just don't know when." I said, you might outlive me. It didn't turn out that way. But, he lived 10 lives in one lifetime. And so just live your lives like there's no tomorrow. and enjoy the time that you have with the people that you're with, because he damn for sure did every time he was around everybody. So thank you again, and thank you, Dad.
Good.